Good morning and welcome to the fifth installment of Hands-On Science. Now today we have a wonderful lesson for you. Now, I've been doing a lot of work on my house during this time frame that we've had, which got me thinking about cells when I was doing my work yesterday. And cells are a greater organelle or organism filled with organelles. How did we look at that? Cells are so small. They're hard to see, hard to understand, hard to conceptualize. Well, I saw my tools sitting around the floor, so I brought them today. Let me go get them. See, my toolbox. Now, if we think about a toolbox, it's like a cell. It has a box or a container. And so this container is very much like a cell. It holds things in. Now, inside this toolbox, we have lots and lots of, you guessed it, tools. They're all held inside here. I have many tools inside this toolbox. Saws, flashlights, batteries. Anybody think what that might be like in a cell? Power supply? Drills. Anything you might need to do a project. Inside of a toolbox, we possess things that we need to carry out our job, so to speak. You know, a carpenter has a large toolbox. Cells possess things called organelles, and these organelles help that cell get its job done. Now, all cells have specific organelles, and we will focus mainly on large structured organelles. So earlier we were talking about cells on a large spectrum or on a large size, talking about different types, animal cell and plant cell. And today I thought we'd bring it a little more narrowed, a little deeper dive into cells and picking on 4 different types of structures in a cell called organelles. And one of the neat things I brought up is the organelles. That word is derived from organum, which is a Latin word meaning tool. So I thought that was really interesting. It brings it back into play on a large size down into this really small size of an organelle being a small tool inside of a cell.
It's the sum of its whole. You know, this one little cell has these organelles in it, and these organelles do a job for that one cell. Now, that one cell is a part of a bunch of other cells that become an organ. And like organelles for particular organs are more than other things. Like, for an example, I love the smooth ER, smooth endoplasmic reticulum is mainly one of its jobs is to detoxify the body, to get all that stuff out of there that we don't want. Well, guess what? The liver has a whole lot of smooth ER. And so this one small little bitty organelle that works with a bunch of other with other cells communicating together that does all this amazing work.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I was going to bring up later on in our discussion an idea, some cells don't have certain organelles.
That's right.
Like red blood cells don't have a nucleus. They lose it.
Yeah.
They don't need it. It's really interesting to bring up the idea smooth ER is found in high amounts in cells that are in the liver. But with one that everybody has is the cell membrane. Every organelle, every organism, every cell has a cellular membrane. So let's start with the cellular membrane.
Well, the cellular membrane is a superhero to me because it's very simple. It's made out of phospholipids, which are fats. And this thing holds the structure of the cell, so it keeps those organelles, the cytoplasm, everything in there. But at the same time, it uses this intelligence we were talking about. Some things like waste and toxins are allowed to get out of the cell, and some things that we need come into the cell. So it's semi-permeable to allow certain things in and keep certain things out and hold the cell together. And it's a very simple structure, but it's very intelligent.
You know, I was thinking you touched on a couple of concepts real quick, active transport and passive transport. Things it can just let in, things like water just pass kind of through it.
Just come right through.
Yeah. And then terrible things that are out there in its environment, acids and alkalins and and bad things for the cell stay out. It protects it against them, like your skin protects you against the outside world. It's like
Excellent
the
point.
cell skin.
Also too, I want to touch this with my kids. The discovery of this was quite intelligent. The fact that we're finding all this out, and the truth is, we still don't know.
You're right.
We still got a man on the job looking at some of the very things that we're talking about in our classroom that will change in 10 years.
To bring that point home right now, one of the new treatments for COVID-19 right now, it's designed to go in and poke holes in the cell membrane so the cell
Yeah.
destroys itself. It can't function. Its environment
amazing.
kills it. So that's really neat. A lot of antibiotics are made to come in and damage cell membranes, which means that cell membranes must have a very distinct pattern in different cells, or an antibiotic would just kill everything in your body. Going to the nucleus, I think about the nucleus being the brain. It's interesting to me that it has its own membrane. The nucleus
That's
has its own membrane.
That's very important to have that nuclear membrane to offer the DNA a little bit more protection. That DNA needs a little bit more. We don't need things going in there messing with that DNA. And so that nuclear membrane helps that. Without it, we wouldn't be here.
You're exactly right. And it's interesting you said another thing that I really wanted to point out. It protects DNA, and that DNA is so important. A lot of times people talk about the nucleus being like the brain of a cell. You have any thoughts on that concept of it being a brain?
I do. The nucleus of many things it does is it holds the DNA. The DNA tells this cell, you are a cell, you are a lung cell, you are a skin cell. This is how you're going to do. You are a liver cell. So it's in that DNA that basically makes more cells. Cells come from other cells, like we learned in our cell theory. So that DNA keeps these cells alive and keeps them going. And then
the nucleus does drive a lot of what a cell does. It tells it what type of cell it's going to be. And even to some degree controls that specific cell after it's told it what to be by sending messages out to mitochondria and ribosomes and other things to tell it to build this or to make this or to create this energy. The next most important thing, in my opinion, is that mitochondria, and another membrane-bound organelle. And you touched on it earlier that mitochondria might be something that a primitive cell engulfed, took it, and made it part of it, and they decided it together. They worked better. So, cells, they need energy. That energy is ATP and comes from the mitochondria. So tell us a little bit about that mitochondria.
They're really diving into that mitochondrion because it has its own DNA, and it comes from the mother.
Yeah.
So we can trace our lineage just through the mitochondrion because of its own DNA. It's the powerhouse. It makes ATP, which runs the cell. The cell could not operate without this energy. So
right.
It has to turn it into the ATP, and it's very efficient with this. And it's probably one of the single great moments of life is when that mitochondrion eased into that first cell and created the eukaryotic cells that we know today. It's kind of neat.
We talked a lot about some of the more important parts of the cell, the mitochondrion and the nucleus and the cellular membrane. And, a lot of times we forget about that little bitty thing called a vacuole. And in plants, they're huge and they really only hold water. They don't really do a terribly high amount of work in a cell, in either plant or animal. And in the plant cell, they mainly just hold water. They hold a little waste, but plants don't have a lot of waste. They make their own food, so they don't consume food that has waste product.
That's a great point. I think that's a very interesting point.
What's your take on that vacuum?
I can't imagine what you would do with the extra waste or the extra energy or whatever you needed. You've got to have it. And I like what you said about plant cells. They're so important to plant cells because they hold that moisture that those plants have to create photosynthesis. So it's a very valuable thing there, but it's also very valuable in animal cells just from the storage end of it. It's going to hold the waste. It's going to hold extra energies, and it communicates, with the Golgi complex and the ER you need to get rid of this now. Okay, let's get this out now. And so here we go, vacuoles. they can literally move to the cell membrane and just release whatever waste in there and gather whatever thing that's on the outside we need. So it's really quite a remarkable thing. That
It's like a storage pod. It's like a stomach, and it's also like a waste removal system, all in one thing.
I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty neat.
Now, the simplicity of a cell is somewhat of its beauty of the cell.
I agree with it. That's a great point. I want you kids to understand the simplicity is its beauty, and it's remarkable, really.
We're moving on to a little bit different activity today with our kids, kind of a design, a define, and restate. And one of the biggest things is to find something that you can relate each specific type to. Is there some more instruction or in-depth instruction you want to give them before we get to the instruction part of the activity lesson here in a little bit?
Well, I can't emphasize enough, like you said in the instructions, you know, try to make this relatable, because you're going to get this again in the 9th grade. So if you can somehow relate, like the instructions say, and hold on to it. In the 9th grade, you're going to pick up sales, and hopefully you're going to have a little bit of understanding of the organelles, hopefully.
Thank you, Coach Bailey, for that wonderful lesson on cell organelles and helping us out with that today. Now, we would really like you, for your activity at home, to go in and find definitions for each of the 4 organelles that we talked about in today's lesson. Find a definition for the cellular membrane. Write that definition down. Then we want you to, on that same document, tell us what that definition means to you. And thirdly, we would like you to find a homologous structure. Now, homologous means something that is similar. Like I brought in earlier, the toolbox. We want you to find something and explain to us how that thing is like the cell membrane. If you need to take a picture of it and insert it there, that would be great too. Do that for all 4 of our organelles of today: cell membrane, the nucleus, the mitochondrion, and the vacuole.
And remember, as always,
go outside, have some fun, and do some science.
bye.
Bye.